The New York City chapter of the Historical Novel Society presents this recording from February 21st, 2026. Faith Justice moderates our international open mic for historical fiction authors. 13 members join her in a Zoom meeting to read excerpts from their published works and works in progress. The historical times and places range from Mesolithic Scotland to World War II stories set in Ireland, France, Germany, and Spain. Along the way, we make stops in 13th century Spain and London, 16th century Scotland and Tudor England, 18th century US and the Ottoman Empire, 19th century New York City and San Juan Island. A Q&A follows the readings. Information about our chapter is available at our website, link listed in the description. Our readers, their works, and links are also listed in the description in the order they read. Thank you, and enjoy the program. My name is Faith Justice. I'm a steering committee member for the New York City chapter of the Historical Novel Society. Our format today is going to be pretty straightforward. I'm just going to introduce our readers by name. They will give us a little bit of background about themselves and their book, and then they will read for about 3 minutes. And at the end of our 13 participants, we will have a Q&A. And one of our other steering committee members, Sarah Relier, will be handling that. So with that, I'm going to get started. And our first person up is Eileen Joyce Donovan. So Eileen, you want to take it away?
My WIP, because this is not, it is a finished book, but it's not been published yet. It's entitled Gramercy Square, and I am coming to you from Mason City, Iowa. It's 1863, and while the Civil War rages on, Elizabeth vows to never again rely on a man for her personal or financial security. But an unexpected inheritance and move to New York City thrusts her into the society's unwritten social codes, where wealthy, beautiful spinsters are blackballed. I'll just give you a little overview of the story, and this is chapter 1. Rye, New York, 1863. The 4 black horses' hooves pounded a dirge into the hard-packed dirt of Main Street as the funeral cortege wound its solemn way through the city streets. The church's small graveyard had reached full capacity months before, with the bodies of Union soldiers returned to their families for the final time from the nation's Civil War. Now, a new, larger cemetery on the city's outskirts was filling up quickly with more soldiers' remains. As terrible as those funerals were, today's funeral was different. Today, the city was burying one of its most prominent citizens, Theodore Wilson. Well respected for the way he treated his employees and people in general, he would be missed. He died much too young, and since his vineyards employed a large portion of the town's citizenry, all wondered what the future held. Elizabeth, his only child and heir, rode in the carriage behind the hearse, her face hidden behind a black veil, her tears unseen by the people lining the streets. Since the day she was born, it had always been just the two of them. While Theodore mourned the death of his wife, he knew she would want him to go on with his life and give their child all his love. So he did, and nurtured Elizabeth into adulthood, into the lovely, accomplished young woman she now was. Although loved by most people, her fierce, independent streak and unusual and sometimes acerbic responses to situations or questions alienated some and baffled others. Earlier, as she left the church after the service, the family lawyer asked if he could speak to her. "Of course, Mr. Mason, but this is not the time or place," Elizabeth said. "No, of course not. Perhaps at the luncheon reception after you greet your guests?" "Certainly. Now excuse me." Elizabeth retreated to the anonymity of her carriage, where she could escape the congregation's eyes. As the carriage wended its way towards the cemetery, Elizabeth wondered why Mr. Mason needed to speak to her today. What was so urgent that it couldn't wait for a day or two? She didn't feel ready to deal with legal issues yet. The carriage passed through the tall wrought iron cemetery gates and stopped at the bottom of a small hill. Tom Graham, her friend since childhood, reined in his horse. He rode directly behind her carriage so he could be close by if she needed him. "I'm here, Elizabeth." Tom reached for her hand to help her down from the carriage. He escorted her to the gravesite and stood next to her, holding her elbow. As she watched the pallbearers lower the casket into the ground, the realization that she was now all alone in the world overwhelmed her. The person she most loved had left her, abandoned her. She determined to keep her heart to herself from this day forward. Never again would she allow herself to experience today's overwhelming grief. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Eileen. That was lovely. Okay, next up we have Mary Kindle. Mary, go ahead and unmute.
Okay, thank you, Faith, for that introduction. I'm here today with my historical romance, The Accidental Heiress, which was released in January 2025. And I am coming to you live from the Baltimore, Maryland area in the United States of America. And I'll read you a quick synopsis. In The Accidental Heiress, Margaret O'Keeffe is desperate to save her ancestral property, Needham Forest, in Maryland horse country in the 1930s, whilst tangled up with her volatile ex-husband, her benefactor's personal problems, and a complicated romance with her lover. When she hears a rumor about hidden treasure on her land, she plunges into a search that uncovers more than gold, with secrets, betrayal, and danger at every turn, and she must decide what to fight for and what to leave behind. So I'll be reading a quick 3-minute snippet from a point in the story where Margaret, the protagonist, is trying to ascertain whether the rumor about the treasure is true. So she's going to a local historical society and wrangling with the lady who runs it. As she entered, Margaret hoped for a different white-haired denizen manning the desk. But just as before, the same little lady sat at her station, engulfed by books and documents. Margaret plastered a smile on her face and rang out a hello. The lady looked at her. Oh, it's you. Margaret found that to be a strange and discouraging greeting, but merely replied, yes, hello again. I took you long enough to get back here. Margaret forced a weak smile on her face. This woman really had an unusual manner. She wondered if it went with the territory, people drawn to historical matters and family trees being unusual. Since she herself had never felt the pull of it, she had never had any dealings with these types. And she had left her number for the woman to call her, but apparently that had been disregarded. Margaret began again. Well, I remembered what the rumor was. The rumor? Yes, the rumor, the woman said in a tone laced with irritation. It was about the rebels in our area, in fact, very near your farm. Walter Mandeville lived near there, and he was the one who told me. Oh, okay. What was it? The rumor, I mean. Mandeville said, he was sweet on me, by the way, that's why he told me. Anyway, he said there was a minor skirmish, so minor that it barely made the news. Margaret cleared her throat and then asked, I had heard of gold being stolen from a train further north. Could that be the source? The woman gave her a bracing glance. Dear, of course that was the source. The North used the railroad to transport gold down to the capital and had stopped at Monocacy. Margaret decided the best approach was to act dumb. Why did they stop there? They were going to unload it at the train station into wagon transport that would take it south into D.C. But that didn't happen. It didn't? No, dear. A band of rebels held up the train, stole the gold, and headed out, presumably south towards Richmond, since that was the capital of the Confederacy. So then, according to Mandeville, there was a skirmish for gold down here near or on my farm? Do you know where exactly? Well, how am I supposed to know that? I've never walked your land. Margaret held in a rising exasperation with the other woman, but kept it at bay and instead asked, okay, so no other details then? Just one. Margaret waited her out. The woman almost seemed to enjoy withholding the detail, dragging it out with a gleam in her eye. If Margaret wasn't mistaken, it might even be a teasing gleam. The silence grew awkward, but still Margaret waited. Finally, the other woman broke it. He said, if my memory is correct, that is, he said that in the middle of the skirmish, there was a tree that served as a landmark. Huh, a tree. And I was just getting to that, if you would let me finish. He gave a noise of aggravation. It was a black walnut tree and stood alone on a slate incline. But what really made it stand out was a cleft in its middle. Now, who knows if it still stands or not, but there you have it.
All right, thank you. All right, our next person up is Charlotte Clutterbuck. My apologies. All right, Charlotte, take it away.
Right, I'm reading from Australia today, and I'm reading from Twin Stars, which is set in Mesolithic Scotland, and it's a realistic novel which is aimed at talented younger readers, but also to older readers who love that genre. So at this point, the characters are Boyd and his twin sister Sulaire. Their antagonists are Aad, the wise woman, and Athru, the son of the headman Fiada. And then there's a small boy, Parsa, who's just fallen off the breakwater and into the sea. Before anyone else could move, Boyd plunged deeper into the water, half wading, half swimming. With the tide running out, he thought he might never reach the boy, that he himself might be washed away, but an incoming wave brought the boy a little nearer, and Boyd grabbed a handful of his hair. Struggling to keep his footing and drag the child to the shore, Boyd was suddenly aware of Fiada threshing towards him, reaching a strong arm to pull him in. As his feet found their grip on the sand, Boyd clutched the child Parsa to his chest. His lips were blue, his eyes closed. He felt cool in Boyd's arms. He had no breath. Boyd couldn't bear the boy to be dead. Parsa, he called as he ran. Parsa, come back. He ran towards Aad. She'd know what to do. But the old woman merely glanced at the figure in his arms and shrugged. He's dead, Aad said, and turned her head away as if the death of the boy, just a thrall, was of no importance. Willing his warmth into the limp body, Boyd turned to Sulaire. Hold him by the feet, she said. Boyd quickly tipped the child upside down, while Sulaire slapped his back until a gush of water came out of his mouth. Boyd swung him upright again, but still he didn't breathe. Sulaire took the child in her arms, raised her eyes to the sky, and knelt on the sand. He has lost his breath, she said. I must lend him some of mine. She put her mouth to the pale lips, blew, turned her head, breathed in, blew again, breathed and blew until, with a fluttering tremor, the child's chest lifted. Parsa coughed, drew a breath, and started to cry. Boyd took the child and held him, feeling the shuddering sobs against his chest and a flooding sense of happiness that the boy was alive. Only then did he become aware of others who'd run to watch. Athru glared at him with the old hatred. Parsa's mother, who'd been standing as if frozen with terror, burst forward, snatching the boy from his arms, staring wildly at Boyd as if he was the danger. Fiada looked from Sulaire to Boyd to Aad, asking, is this a sign of the gods that she made the child alive again when even you could not? Aad hissed, a sign to fear. Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, and next up is Joyce Predmeski.
Thank you, Faith. I'm calling from sunny South Florida, where it's currently 77 degrees. And the name of my story is The Space Between Right and Wrong. It's a historical fiction set in World War II Ireland with elements of suspense and romance. It's complete at 90,000 words and has 3 points of view. I'm reading my hook, and it is an American engineer, an Irish nurse, and an assassin for the Irish Republican Army have one thing in common. They all hunger for revenge. My story opens in the North Atlantic in February of 1942. Nick Larson stood at the stern of USS McLeish, a destroyer that was part of a convoy on its way to Great Britain. He huddled in his jacket against a raw day as the sun dipped in and out of hostile clouds. Turbulent seas and merciless winds made him wonder if the Atlantic Ocean was angry with the human race. He certainly was. 9 words on a flimsy sheet of paper had transformed him into a bitter person, and now they were stuck in his heart, refusing to leave. Stefan shot down over English Channel by German Luftwaffe. The telegram from Nick's father had arrived at the Lockheed plant on December 7th, just as Japan was pummeling the Hawaiian Islands, a coincidence with evil intentions. Never far from his thoughts, he remembered the tiniest of details from that day as they haunted him with cruel intensity. The carefree and crisp Southern California morning. A sky so blue it had no beginning and no end. All that changed when American fighter planes streaked west across the sky, declaring a shift from peace to war. He never imagined a heart could break twice within the space of a few seconds, but reality paid no heed to the unimaginable. As he stood gripping the railing of the McLeish, he considered how his life had altered since the attack on Pearl, since the death of his brother. He bowed his head and felt disgust at the selfish thought his brother wasn't the only pilot to die fighting the Nazis. Losing Stefan had driven him to depths of despair unknown to him at any other time of his life. It should have been him in that airplane. He was the eldest. Gusts of wind grabbed his tears before they could flow down his face, as though nature required evidence of a grief with no limit. Nick scanned the Atlantic and considered another matter, the unopened letter in his pocket. He had avoided the dispatch for several days. A few more minutes would make no difference. An icy wave chose that moment to smack him in the face, as if the North Atlantic felt compelled to scold him for a flawed decision. He wiped the water away and smiled without pleasure at the rebuke. The attack on Pearl, along with his brother's death, had filled his heart with vengeance. He had wanted to fight the Japanese in the South Pacific or the Germans in Europe. Either would have provided the satisfaction he craved. Eventually, Lockheed Aircraft Corporation and United States government convinced him that building a secret Allied air base in Northern Ireland was more important than one angry person hunting down enemy. After several exchanges of hot tempers and elevated voices, Nick accepted the civilian assignment. That decision, however, didn't stop the hate and impotence from surging through his heart like acid eating through steel. The burning desire to avenge Stefan's death lived within him night and day, but he acknowledged that it would have to wait a little longer. Back to you, Faith.
All right. Thank you very much. And next up is Beverly Cooper Pierce. Beverly, can you unmute? There you go. Excellent.
Okay.
So go ahead, Beverly.
Okay. I'm reading from Manchester by the Sea, Massachusetts, where it is not 77 degrees, and we are awaiting a blizzard. My novel is called The Rowans. I can look it up. The setting is a field in 1750 where a young girl is helping her father to clear stone from a new rye field. And she asks to borrow her father's compass. Samson took her father's precious brass compass and, holding it with care, took it to the middle of the field. She watched as the needle quivered north, pointing straight into the new woodlot. Lifting her eyes from the needle, she smiled and whirled all the way round once to see in a single sweep new woodlot, old rye field, blue sky, house downhill, barn past trees, stone fence begun, uphill, more trees, and woodlot. And there she stopped short, due north. Then she whirled once more and stopped, whirled again, stopped, whirled, stopped. And when images were swinging all around her head, she sat down on the ground, and when her eyes settled again, she raised the fine triangular blade that turned the brass circle of the earth into a sundial. It showed mid-morning. She felt it must be later, so she looked up into the sky to be sure the sundial was telling her the truth about this hot day, and it was. Slipping from the sunlight, she cupped the compass in her two hands and looked deep into it, wondering again how this miraculous thing was possible, that she could hold right here all the directions to all the created earth, and also tell from a little triangle pointing up to God's wide heaven, just where she was in this day, in the middle of a morning, in the middle of the world. Holding the blade down, she tucked the miracle into the pocket tied inside her petticoat and stood to survey the field, surprised to find that in the midst of all far-flung earthly directions, she felt as if she were floating. Her arms lifted right up into the air, all on their own, and she felt as light as when Grandmother Cat's brother Isaac came to visit with his fiddle, and all the Bennets, or most of them, would dance. They would carry chairs, bench, and table out of the parlor to open up space like a field, like this field, and Mother, who knew all the steps perfectly, would show them once more. Then Uncle Isaac would play his fiddle, and Papa would go to Mother. He looked so happy dancing with Mother, and she smiled all the evening long. Tamsin now, in her mind's ear, heard Uncle Isaac playing his fiddle. Magically, she said later to Grandmother Cat. Indeed, he played All in a Garden Green so nimbly and sweetly that just here in the field she began to dance, whispering beneath the lift and tumble of his notes. My left hand in the boy's right, I turn right, 4 steps up, 4 back, then turn to face James. Her heart sang with the fiddle, step left, step right, turn all the way round, and 'tis James. Step again, left, right, turn, and she smiled. Step to James.
All right, thank you, Bev. Next up, we have Stuart Balcom. And let's see, where are you, Stuart? Here we go. You're unmuted. Take it away.
I'm Stuart Balcom from Venice, California, and my book, Through the Lion's Gate, a medieval tale of intrigue and transmutation, is about an alchemist in 1352 London and his young apprentice, Tom, as they try to unlock the secret to making gold while avoiding the greedy eyes of the king and the queen. And characters include the King and Queen of England, the Duke and Duchess of Lancaster, and a young Geoffrey Chaucer and his parents. And I must say that everything in the book could have happened for real and nothing in history would have been changed. I left no fingerprints, or footprints, I should say. The scene is Tom is returning from acquiring a very important alchemical ingredient for his master. The large room was a study in orderly chaos. Shelves lining the walls contained a collection of glass jars of multicolored powders, crucibles, coral, and bits of many different metals. On the table in the center of the room were tools, books, earthenware pots, a mortar and pestle, and a large pile of intricately detailed diagrams and notes. In the far corner behind the master was a copper bain-marie, a double chamber for boiling liquids invented by the infamous alchemist Mary the Jewess. It perched on an iron grate over the firebox of a large brick and stone furnace. The sides of the furnace sloped up to the chimney, which continued through the vaulted ceiling and eventually joined the chimney of the smithy directly above, giving the secret operations below the needed camouflage. For Elias Dorn was reputed by many to be a wizard, one schooled in the black arts and a practitioner of necromancy. In fact, he was an alchemist. The making of gold, nature's infinite secret, was his quest, though not for the attainment of unlimited material wealth. Gold was believed to be a combination of the 4 elements, earth, air, fire, and water, in such perfect proportion that they could not be separated. In unlocking the secret to the Philosopher's Stone, the key that could transmute base metals into gold, Some alchemists of Europe believed that they could find perfection and possibly divinity, elevating mankind to a status equal to God. It was precisely this divine quest which the church held to be sacrilegious. For man was on earth by the grace of God, not as an equal. Trying to attain divine status violated all precepts of Christianity. In the event of alchemical success, it would render the church meaningless. Pews would be deserted as earthly subjects of the divine one no longer felt the need for salvation, hoping they could become the object of their worship. Arab alchemy went to Hispania with the Moors, from where it then spread throughout Europe. Because of the cryptic notation of the secret formulae and treks to Al-Andalus to study in the legendary black schools, many alchemists were considered to be wizards possessing occult powers. Some called it magic. Many called it the work of the devil. It was for these reasons that Tom had made his way back to the laboratorium as stealthily as he did. He carried a small amount of dragon's blood, or dima u tanina, the Arabic name for cinnabar, which was essential to the making of hydrogyrum, Greek for liquid silver. If he was caught, his mission would be obvious. Quicksilver, or mercury, was an integral alchemical ingredient.
All right. Thank you very much, Stuart. So next up is Julieta Rodriguez. Julieta, you want to unmute? Okay, take it away, Julieta.
Thank you very much, Faye. So I'm reading about The Artist's Servant, a novel of Constantinople. This is a novel I just finished. I'm looking for a publisher. This is about a fugitive from Portugal accused of regicide in the late 18th century. After a short stay in Morocco, he lands in Constantinople, where he becomes an assistant to Antoine Ignace Melling, a Levantine artist of the Bosphorus. Here, he meets a Sephardic Jewish healer whom he falls in love with. This encounter changes his life. I'm reading from chapter 10, The Harem of the Grand Seigneur, and the protagonists are Policarpo and Leia. Now sitting in Leia's front room, I looked at her. How do you know so much about the harem? Remember the first day we met in this same room and there was a knock at the window when you were about to leave? I do. All these years later, I could still hear the sharp rap against the glass. A carriage was waiting for me outside, and I told you I was going to Sultanahmet. You never asked, but I will tell you now. I'm often called to the harem at the Seraglio to help the women. Some are worn to shadows after a life competing for the Sultan's attention. The baths, the outings, the perfumes, the chocolates, even the Spanish fans aren't enough to sustain them. They need a healer more than you do. Huzzah! I smiled. You are even better at keeping secrets than I. When I enter the harem, many women greet me saying, "Our savior has arrived." I bring my pots of medicinal confections, syrups and pastes, sometimes opium, viper flesh, and honey. I use as many remedies as I can get. I also call genies, exercise spells, and evoke both gods and demons. Whatever works. I see. When your master, Melling, lived at Princess Hathi's palace, a woman I was healing whispered to me that his life might be in danger as much as her own. She had tried to run away, but had been caught by the palace guards. She hated her life, and her misery was palpable. What did she say about Mr. Melling being in danger? She said the prince's household didn't want Mr. Melling living there, that the closeness between her and your master was against Islam. Since persuasion hadn't worked, rumors were circulating that a plot was taking shape to find more efficient means. I was thunderstruck. as if my breath had left this old body of mine. You can't understand this nation if you analyze it with Western eyes, Leah added. The elements of play here are inscrutable to someone like you. It does seem that way, I replied. Outside, the wind had gained momentum and was now groaning at the house. Here, wooden structures, like Leah's corner home, expanded and contracted with the damp that rose from the Bosphorus. These dwellings were like ships at sea, nearly touching, leaning towards each other across the dead-end alleys. I love the closeness of a city built of timber. It matched the intimacy between Leah and me. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Julieta.
Thank you.
And next up is Jessica Naus. Did I pronounce that right, Jessica? You can unmute.
Hi, I'm Jessica Knaus. Thank you. I'm coming in from Zamora, Spain, and I'm going to read from my work in progress, and it's called Losing the Queen. Its synopsis for now is, after a series of terrible incidents in 13th century Spain, Queen Violante believed she had a say in how the kingdom would continue. She was so wrong. In this snippet, Queen Violante is with her new daughter-in-law Blanche in a room full of nobles playing chess. Do you think you can use that board to show me how you play in France? I asked Blanche. I'd much rather you taught me the game that can be played on that large board, Mother Violante. Very well, I say, but I'm much more pleased than that. If she learns our various ways to play chess, she'll hone her political strategy and be a true help to my son. When Blanche and I arrive at the board, Don Nuno is shifting the pillows in search of the pieces he upset. Last one, Your Majesty, he says, holding up an ebony pawn that somehow found its way under the board. I accept the piece from Nuno, who starts separating the ivory, green, red, and ebony pieces into groups. I accept the piece from Nuno, who starts, okay. You may leave us, Don Nuno, I tell him. I'll take advantage of the blank board to teach the princess how we play. Wonderful, he says. He kisses my fist with the pawn inside it, then makes the same reverence to Blanche's delicate, limp hand. Your Majesties. He goes to sit between Juan de Zamora and Alfonso to observe both games. The princess and I settle into the pillows across from each other. I clear the spaces in front of me and select the largest ivory piece from its pile. This is the king. He's the most important. All the other pieces define their roles in relation to him. Sounds right, says Blanche. I set the king in his square and reach for the second largest piece. This is the vizier. He can move one square diagonally at a time, and just like in real life, his role is to stay close to the king and support whatever the king does. Blanche bites her lip. This is interesting, Mother Violante, and perhaps you'd like to know. In France, that piece is called the Queen, and she's the most powerful. She can move as many squares as she needs to along any diagonal. What nonsense do they get up to in France? The king is supposed to be the most important. You agreed. The king is the most important, and that he's the piece we must protect. But who protects him? The queen, who can come to his aid long before any other piece. It's just like life. Alfonso doesn't even have a vizier, but when he needed someone to settle the argument between the council and the bishop in Leon, or make the Mudéjars see the error in their rebellion, I stepped in. I protected my king better than any of his knights or vassals ever could have. Blanche doesn't see how well I've understood her. When your queen is taken, your king becomes too vulnerable to last long. You may have to make a few more moves, but from a pragmatic point of view, the game is over. If you lose the queen, you've lost everything. The silence between us as we gaze into each other's eyes expands, and the hall seems to hum. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. And next up is Richard Corbett. You'd like to unmute, please? All right, Richard, take it away.
The title of my novel is All the Words Must Come Out. It's complete, but it's not yet published. I'm in Plainsboro, New Jersey, and the setting of my novel is Madrid during the Spanish Civil War. So, everything is someone else's fight? Susan's voice had sharpened. You think you're safe here, but it's an illusion. I hear people are keeping lists of names for after the war. If they ever find you, they're not going to like you or this bookstore. O'Malley flinched and struggled to keep a neutral expression. You seem to think everything will just fall into place for you. Nothing is falling into place in Spain right now, unless you count bodies falling into graves. She folded her arms across her chest. I will make things fall into place. That's the illusion you have, O'Malley said, closing his book and standing up. That's not how Spain works. You need a plan for leaving. Your passport is stamped not valid for travel in Spain, and the French government could close the border at any moment. I don't think you have a plan for yourself either, Benjamin O'Malley. I thought we could work together to get me and the manuscript out of Spain. Why do you keep thinking you and I are we? Because you won't be satisfied with anything less than the truth. Isn't that what you're looking for in all these books? The truth is all I'm here for. I thought that made you and me a we. She said it so effortlessly. Her tone was no longer aggrieved, but somehow that made O'Malley more uncomfortable. Susan got up from the chair and moved toward the door. I've taken a room at the Hotel Florida. It's the best place to find more information. I'll let Juan know where you are. He'll want to know. And what about you? I'll be selling books. So that's it then? I'm on my own? Susan said in a chilled voice, her face hardened. At the door, she paused and turned, leaving a moment for him to say something, anything. O'Malley filled the pause with an impassive stare. She eased herself out of the store, and as the door closed behind her, a coldness fell about the empty space. Watching through the window, as she walked away, O'Malley assured himself he was right. But then, why did he feel so bad? He could finally get back to things as they were. But somehow, it was no longer clear how things should be. It was as if he was back in Dublin, walking the streets alone, knowing no one, and no one knowing him.
Okay, thank you very much. Next up is Cynthia Anderson. And Cynthia, oops, okay.
Yeah, hi.
Yep, got it.
I'm reading to you today from The Sister Behind the Berlin Wall, and it's my novel that will be published next week. The Sister Behind the Berlin Wall follows French sisters Leah and Rose, who are sent by the Vichy regime in 1942 to work in Germany, where their bond is tested beyond anything they could have imagined in this heart-wrenching World War II tale. And I'm going to read to you today from chapter 13, where Leah, the two sisters are orphans, and they've been living at a vineyard, and they were helping the vineyard owner, Edward, to sell some of his wine on the black market. And one of them is caught. and she ends up in an internment camp in just outside of Orleans. And I live in Swiss, but I'm actually in France at the moment. So Leah paced the camp, walking along the edge of the barbed wire fence. She couldn't stop thinking about Rose, her sister, and what would happen to her if she remained here. Now that poor Edward was gone, Virginie would struggle to hold on to the winery. She might not be able to manage it on her own, and Rose would have to find another place to live. Rose could always return to her job cleaning the school in the mornings, but the pay wouldn't be enough to cover a room in one of the cheaper boarding houses. The only way to support Rose was to go to Germany, though it meant Rose would lose her sister, as well as having lost Andre, the man she was in love with. Kicking pebbles, she struggled with the choices ahead. Just arrived? Leah turned. Behind the barbed wire stood a woman with sunken blue eyes. "It's the second time you've gone past this way," the woman said. Behind her, a group of women sat on the steps of a barracks, smoking and watching Leah. "Yesterday," Leah said. "Oh, that's why you're walking in circles," the woman laughed. "Maybe." Leah couldn't help but smile. "And you?" "A week." She looked beyond Leah, straining to see farther. "What's it like on your side?" Leah shrugged. "Too many people, too few cabins, not enough toilets, cold nights." She shifted her feet, stirring dust in the rocky dirt. "Same as here." She hugged her waist. "That's why I'm getting out." "They're letting you out?" Leah's voice caught. The woman looked up, her gaze drifting after a black bird slicing across the sky. Sunlight glared down, and she made a visor with her hand. "A recruitment man came by. Wants us to work in Germany. Volunteers, he says. Did he come over on your side too?" "No." Leah nudged a puddle with her foot. It was true what Met Malone had said about recruiting women with criminal records. "There's a 1,000 franc bonus on departure." She rubbed one eye. "Says you'll send half my first month's money up front to my mother." Leah angled her body away from the fence, wanting to keep walking. "I need that money for my little boy, Raphael." "You have a boy? How old?" Leah said, turning back to the woman. 3. "Only 3? It must be hard to be away from him." She nodded, her expression tense. "I'm not like the others." She glanced at the women on the steps. "After I had Raphael, I lost my job. His father is a prisoner of war in Germany." "That must have been hard. What's your name?" "Juliet. And you?" "Leah." She paused. "Does your mother care for Raphael while you're here?" "Yes, but she has no money. Papa walked out on her before the war." As Juliet spoke, Leah stared through the barbs in the fence. Tiny metal crosses tilted sideways like mines sticking up in the air. "In Germany, I'll be paid to work. I'll be doing something I won't be ashamed of." Her mouth tightened. "Using my brain and not my body." She looked at Leah, desperation in her eyes. "Do you understand?" Yes. Leah had heard that prostitutes were kept in a separate part of the Jargeau camp. She shuddered to think of the poor woman's choices. Earn money as a prostitute in France or work in Germany. A bitter taste welled in her mouth.
Thank you. I had to mute myself because I think I had mentioned we've got some construction going on in our house, and the saw was just really loud. So thank you very much, Cynthia. And next up is Margaret. Skay, and please correct my pronunciation.
Margaret Ski.
Ski. All right, thank you.
And I'm in Scotland, but I grew up in Ulster during the Troubles. So conflict is what I emotionally understood. Turn of the Tide is the first book in a trilogy set in the context of a long-running clan feud called the Ayrshire Vendetta. Everybody in the book is real except one fictional family that I tossed to be piggy in the middle between the two clans. The book opens with a historic massacre, and my fictional family are called the Monroes, and this little snippet is when the main protagonist returns home. He has been instrumental in the massacre, and he's returned home to his wife following it. Monroe returned home, wearied, and with a conscience and stomach alike uneasy. Even the sight of the sheep pens prepared for lambing and the fresh thatch on the stable roof failing to raise his spirits, to be met with stony silence and a chill in the atmosphere, indicating that a whisper of some sort had beaten him. The presence of the twins clamouring for attention protected him from immediate censure. But alone in their chamber, Kate rounded on him. A day or two only? It may not signify. He reached out, but she twisted away as if his touch would soil her. The Cunninghams have lost much. It was an unconscious echo of William Cunningham. The half of Ayrshire has lost much, and over many years. She sucked in air as if to fan a flame. Indeed, all of Scotland is salted with old rivalries that erupt in season and out of it like boils, which, doctored or not, leave scars aplenty to mar the landscape of our lives. Must we have part in it? She took a handful of twigs from the basket by the hearth, snapped them into kindling. It is a dirty business, and no one the winner, save perhaps the coffin makers and clothiers who aye make good money of men's folly. Cunningham or Montgomery. It makes no odds. Dear God, to think more of obligation than our children. He wanted to protest that it had been their children he thought of, and her, for to refuse the Earl of Glencairn, but he risked only, I did but as I was bid, as I was bound to do. No one is bound, save by the laws of God. Turning her back, she unpinned her hair, snuffed the candle, spoke into the darkness. There is always a choice. If this is yours, do not look to me to share it.
Okay, thank you, Margaret.
I should have said it was 1586.
All right. Okay, next up is Janet Oakley. Janet, you want to unmute?
Thank you.
There we go.
So I'm Janet Oakley. I write as J.L. Oakley, and I'll be reading from Mischievous. I live in Bellingham, Washington. I'm just south of the BC border. And I'll read briefly from the back. Jeannie Naughton never intended to run away from her troubles, but in 1860, a woman's reputation is everything. A scandal not of her own making forces her to flee England for an island in the Pacific Northwest, a territory jointly occupied by British and American military forces. At English camp, Jeannie meets American Jonas Breed. Breed was once captive and slave, a mischievous of the Haida, and still remains close ties to the Coast Salish Indians. He was also born in Hawaii. And on this island, there are Hawaiians or Kanakas who work for Hudson Bay Company. So I'm going to read a little excerpt. In this scene, Jeannie has lost her little boy to smallpox, and occasionally there were outbreaks around between Victoria and the mainland area of Washington Territory. And so she's agreed to go down to Breed to help nurse Hawaiians or Kanakas who have contracted the virus. It was smoky inside the one-room hut, but warm. A lean-to provided additional space for sleeping. Lamps were hung from the rafters, as well as smoked salmon and laundry. Several pages torn out of the Colonial, a newspaper at Victoria, graced the walls. A small cast iron stove crackled and popped, radiating heat out into the space. Jeannie immediately went to it and rubbed her cold hands together, then looked toward the bed in the lean-to, where a young man was lying. She was surprised to see another man sleeping on the floor next to him. 2 men and a woman sat beside them. She assumed all of them were Indian, but some had features she hadn't seen around Fort Victoria. They wore European clothes, although some were barefooted. By lantern light, everything seemed distorted and in shadows. Breed came in behind her with a tin coffee pot and put it directly on the stove. "We'll get you warmed up as soon as possible, Mrs. Naughton." Jeannie hugged her blankets. "They should be outside, Mr. Breed." "It's too late. They've already been exposed." He greeted the men and the women by name and introduced Jeannie. "This is Alani Kapuna. Over there is Billy, Jimmy Tuban." The names came at her at a rush, musical and foreign. Jeannie tentatively smiled back. "Who is vaccinated?" "Charlie, Billy Poe, Alani Amoka Kapuna are vaccinated. In fact, all but a handful. Hasn't been an outbreak in this area for 14 years. Indians and Kanaka seldom get vaccinated. Tens of thousands of Salish people died in the last 50 years. Jeannie swallowed. Jeremy wasn't vaccinated. The doctor said he was too young, that there was no need, that I should wait. She rubbed her arm. I had mine long before he was born. She heard her voice break from grief as it rose up and thickened her throat. "It wasn't your fault," Breed said. "Thank you, Mr. Breed. That was kind of you to say, although I do not often believe it." She removed the blankets on her shoulders and put them on a ladder-back chair. "This is my friend Kawikalama." Breed pointed to the figure rolled up in a blanket. "I tried to get liquids into him earlier, made a tea for the fever. The sores are troubling." Jeannie stepped toward around the man on the floor and looked at Cowie. Even in sickness, he was handsome. He had short, brown, wavy hair, brown skin with high cheeks and straight nose. Jeannie could not help notice the thick, dark lashes on his closed eyes. Bracing herself, she touched his forehead, avoiding the crop of sores near his temples. It was very warm. She felt his pulse, trying to remember all the things Dr. Parker had told her at English Camp Dispensary, but more importantly, what she had learned from the surgeon of the Esquimalt Naval Station about variola since Jeremy took ill. Breed pulled back the covers. The patient's arms and shoulders were covered with pustules that looked like tiny buttons ringed with red. The pustules grouped together in 3s and 5s. Some were pus-filled. Kawe Kalama smelled of fish oil.
All right, thank you. And next up is Martha Jean. Martha? There we go. Take it
I
away.
am in Jersey City, New Jersey, and my novel is The Queen's Musician. It is about Mark Smeaton, who was a musician, and he was one of 5 men executed for adultery with Anne Boleyn. Most of the book is about the historic events and the marquee names in the Tudor court. But I also tried to imagine his life beforehand. So this scene is Mark Smeaton's first solo performance at court. He's 18 years old. A nobleman has finally noticed how gifted he is. He himself has his eye on a young woman, Madge Shelton. Unfortunately for him, she is Anne Boleyn's younger cousin. So he realizes that a romance between them would be impossible and completely forbidden. So this is Mark Smeaton's first solo appearance at the court of Henry VIII. I had volunteered to perform the most difficult pieces and had practiced until the music permeated the muscles of my fingers and hands. That evening, I played the most intricate passages without error or hesitation. Sound flowed from my mind and body as each listener slipped into his own private thoughts and recollections. This was a gift I could give. When the dancing began, I switched to the virginals, one of 4 musicians taking turns. Our task was to accompany the dancers late into the night. No single musician would have had the strength to do it alone. The king danced with Lady Anne, their eyes locked on each other as they paraded across the floor. Together they embodied every tale I'd ever heard about romance and royalty. He was masterful and charismatic. She was glamorous and raven-haired. That night, they must have believed their future was predestined, that history and nature would bend to their desires. When some men turned their attention to politics, musicians took their places for the dances so all the ladies would have partners. For an instant, I danced the pavane with Mistress Shelton, our fingers touching and her shimmering pale green skirt swirling near my legs. I remember my thought when I took her hand. This is as close to her as I will ever be. The ball ended in the early morning, the king and his court departing while servants and musicians cleared away chairs, benches, and instruments. Lord Rochford stayed behind, and he approached me and thanked me for my performance. He gave me a small bag of coins, the first gift of money I'd ever had from a nobleman. I didn't open it in his presence. No musician would ever do that. I returned to my room, stored my lute in its case, and put my wonderful doublet away. I sat on the bed, holding the bag in my hands, preparing to be disappointed. Sometimes even the wealthiest patrons filled the pouches with small copper coins that didn't add up to much. But when I looked inside, I saw the flash of silver. George Boleyn, Lord Rochford, had given me an exceptionally large sum of money.
Okay, thank you, Martha. All right, that concludes the reading portion of this. And let's see, Sarah, I'm going to ask you to unmute. And yeah, there you go. So Sarah, you want to take over now?
Okay. Sure. I think we should give people just a moment in case anyone has a question that they wish to type into the chat. We have one brief question and a comment at the moment. So Christy is asking if we could have a summary of who read what.
Okay.
We do have the list of readers on their websites. We could perhaps post a summary on Facebook in the next couple days.
Right. Okay. Yeah, what I do is I'm also the person who renders the program and puts it up on Spotify and YouTube. And what I do in the metadata is I list your name, your website, the name of the work in progress, or just call it work in progress, the title if it's actually published, and a link to to a sales page if there is one at this time. So yes, that information will all be available in the metadata, meaning it'll be there on YouTube and Spotify. And you guys get the SEO, the search engine optimization, by having incoming links. So that's the answer to the first question.
Okay, and the other it's a comment from Margaret that she loves Jessica's virtual background, and I agree. And those are our comments right now. If anyone has a question for any of the readers, we could just have people unmute and ask without having to type it in if anybody has a question.
Yeah, I agree. I've asked everybody they can unmute. So if anybody, including the readers, I mean, if you heard something that you have a question for one of the other authors, please speak up.
Well, Joyce, I was really interested in your story about building a base in Ireland. I read about Norway in World War II and the resistance. So anytime I hear something about World War II and a new story, I'm always very curious about it. So how did you latch into it?
Thank you. What's interesting is the secret air base is called Langford Lodge, and it's an actual air base that was built, and it still exists today, and it's home to a couple of different flying clubs. So the story is based on real life to a certain extent.
How did you come up with it? How did you find the story? Kind of stumbling across, like we always stumble across something. It's like, whoa, that's kind of interesting.
Well, my mother came from Ireland right after World War II, and I was always a fan of World War II. And I would ask her, how was her life impacted by World War II, living outside of Dublin? And she really didn't remember anything specific other than, rationing for gasoline and food. And it kind of confused me because Ireland was in the middle of all of the conflict, basically. So that led to research, and which led to this story.
Anybody else have questions or comments?
I have comments about. I didn't catch.
Mary, I'm not hearing you. Is everybody else hearing her?
Here.
Yes.
Can you hear me? Okay. You probably mentioned it, but I didn't catch it. The setting for your novel, I love the protagonist's first name, Tamsin.
Yes.
Yes.
And I'm guessing England?
Actually, Massachusetts Bay Colony. It's a fictionalized version of the town of Gloucester in the Massachusetts Bay Colony.
Really early days of settlement.
Yeah.
I'm just, and it was the Rowan tree is the title?
The Rowans.
The Rowans.
My father's family were all around Gloucester, Salem, Newbury back then, and it's a braiding and fictionalization of those three branches of my father's family.
Sweet.
And
you didn't move too far away.
I did. I lived in Minnesota for a long time, but I'm back.
Yeah.
A great sense of movement in that bit you read, Bev.
Thank you.
Yeah. And that's a lovely area. My ancestors came to Newbury in 1638, so I always prick up when I hear Massachusetts.
Does the name Pierce ring a bell then? That's the Newbury family.
Yes, and somewhere along that line, everybody came over in that boat, ended up intermarrying over, I think, a century and a half. So my family name was March. And they live right next to the Pierce. It's just a riot when you start doing genealogy. And I like that someone was also doing genealogy work. Was that the Gold on the Farm story, Mary Kendall? Because that was involving genealogy.
In fact, yeah, that's probably what drew me to Bev's story, the genealogy connections. I've done some genealogy in that region where you're from, and I love how you come across those sort of old English names, first names. It's really neat. Yeah, a lot of connections.
That's fun stuff.
Yeah.
Martha,
Mary, what was the name of your book?
Sorry.
I'm sorry.
The name of my book?
Yes.
Is The Accidental Heiress.
Thank you.
I was going to say to Martha that my ears really picked up when I heard you talk about your book, The Queen's Musician, because I'm a musician as well. I've worked in the LA area in the music business, film and TV for 40 some years. And and my book takes place about 200 years earlier than yours. So I'm going to look for your book. Look forward to it.
Well, thank you. I was drawn to that period for many, many years, but I was drawn to him because he was a musician. And, I think that was so much a part of his identity. And so actually one of the joys of writing the book was finding out more about musicians in that era.
I'll look forward to it.
Thank you.
I have a question for Joyce.
Yep.
I was curious as to whether your novel touched upon the controversy that erupted during World War II between De Valera and Churchill as to the use of Irish naval bases by the British Navy.
No, I do mention De Valera in the book a little bit, only because he was a strong supporter of keeping Ireland neutral, but not in that specific reference to that. No, I don't get it. Most of this is focusing on the building of this Allied air base, and an IRA agent is trying to destroy it. That's the crux of the story.
And was it mainly the US who was involved in building the Allied air base, or was it more of a joint European effort?
It was a joint effort between Britain and the US. And the Brits actually outsourced the running of the base to the Americans.
Thank you.
And it was more like an airplane depot place where they would repair and keep and maintain the planes. It wasn't an air base that actually, I don't think it was an air base where they actually flew out to attack Germany.
Anybody else?
I have a question for Cynthia. And Cynthia, my question, the sister behind the Berlin Wall, is this a World War II? I think I just missed a little bit of it. Is this a World War II novel, or is it, in the 60s?
Yeah, it actually opens in 1990. Or 89? When does the wall fall? November 1989. There's a letter from one sister to the other. And so it's really telling the story of the about 80,000 French women who were sent to work in Germany in the factories during World War II. And it's kind of a little known story because a lot of them came back to, find a very different situation in France where they kind of had to hide that they had done that. So one of the sisters ends up back in France, but because they were sent to the far eastern part of Germany, just on the border with Prague, the other sister, circumstances happen, and when the Red Army liberates that part of Germany, she's not able to get out. And so we don't know which sister in the opening, and then it's only after the fall of the Berlin Wall that the sisters are able to be reunited.
Okay, so it starts in World War II and then
Yeah, so there's a
finishes.
prologue and an epilogue that is the 1989 period, but it's really the story of these women and just kind of how they had to deal with that experience, because the story's been a little bit hidden. We don't really know very much about the women that were sent by the French government. They were considered volunteers because France was an ally of Hitler to work in the factories.
Interesting. Sounds very interesting.
Thanks.
And did money get sent to the kid, to the grandmother to raise the kid? Did they honor
Yeah,
that?
I mean, and that was part of the reason why so many of the French women ended up signing these contracts. Germany had like 11 million laborers, and the majority of them, civilian laborers, were forced laborers from the Soviet Union, about 4.3 million. And they were just taken when Hitler invaded Russia. But France actually sent the second largest number, which is 2.3 million. And a lot of them were French prisoners of war who were held in prisoner of war camp in Germany, and they could change their status and become laborers. And then their salaries were sent back to France. A lot of them were young men who became the age of military service during the 5 years of German occupation of France. And they were then sent to Germany for their military service. And then there were about 80,000 French women who, stumbled on difficult times, and it was the only way that they could keep their family alive was actually to go work in Germany.
Wow, that's really interesting. I didn't know that story. Actually, I was a student in Vichy, France in 1966. I did a year abroad. But a lot of people don't know that there were, I think the count is 20,000 Russian POWs in Norway, and they were doing forced labor. One of the men I interviewed for my first novel years ago, he was still mourning this man who was in a hole with a tin roof over him. He lived on the western coast of Norway. But in Falstad, which is north of Trondheim, there were a number of POWs held there. And when I got to visit that place, I went to a killing field. I've never been to a killing field before. And many of the POWs that were at Falstad, they were executed in those forests. There was a huge group working on a road that goes all the way up to past Tromsø, way far north and all that. And I'm actually I'm working on a new novel, and I'm looking into the Russian POWs because they did not want to go back to Soviet Union, but they were forced to go, and many were
forced to go.
And they were executed or sent to gulags.
Yeah, it was really terrible. That's one thing I found out when I did my research through the international tracing. It's now called the Arlsen Archives, ARLSEN, I believe, but it was the International Tracing Services that originally had the documentation. And they were forced to hand over the Russians. The Allies had to hand over the Russians to the Russian army, and they were either sent to the gulags or they were immediately killed. I mean, it was, they'd gone through all of this forced labor and brutal conditions, and then they weren't even accepted back. It was crazy.
Yeah, the idea is they're exposed to Norwegian, democracy and stuff like that. The case in up in Norway. So yeah.
But wasn't Norway neutral? But they still had prisoners of war there?
5 years occupation, and they were the last to surrender. They did not surrender on May 7th or 8th. They surrendered on the 9th with British forces. The Germans refused to capitulate to anyone in the resistance. So they had to bring in someone from I think it was one of the British Air Corps that came to Oslo, and then they surrendered to them. They could have gone another 6 months. Some of the most vile people were in Norway. They were fanatic Nazis. So that's something I've been working on for 30 years. It's a pretty amazing story.
Thanks for sharing that. I'm Swedish, and it's something we haven't learned or we haven't been told until quite recently. More has come up recently about the Norwegian participation in the war. And I haven't followed it too much, but I'm very interested in learning more. So I'm going to look into your book. And Sweden was neutral, by the way, Cynthia, but Norway.
And they were kind of hostile to a lot. In the early years, we're talking like 1940, many people fled into Sweden from Norway, or they got on fishing boats and went to Shetland, which I write about. But they also, agents sneaking into Sweden to meet up with usually it's a British consul. They had to be very careful because there were a lot of Gestapo people in Stockholm. But later on, like after the fall of Paris came back in, their whole things changed. They allowed police camps, they called them, to train young men, Norwegians, to prepare for coming back after Norway was liberated. It's fascinating history. I mean, I'm very privileged to learned about it.
Yeah, amazing. There's also something about women who had relationships with soldiers that has come out more recently, at least in Sweden, that I have learned a little more about that I didn't before. Sorry about my video. My husband is working behind me, so that's why
I don't hear a thing.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, my father-in-law was from Sweden, and it's I've gone to Norway twice, but I need to go to Sweden.
It's beautiful.
I know.
Thanks.
Okay.
Every time you think you've heard all of the horror stories of World War II, you always hear something new.
Mm-hmm. It's difficult, and those of us that write about that period, we get a little nervous. Things going on because there's certain beats.
Yeah.
You have to watch out for.
Yeah, agreed.
Okay.
I wonder if I can ask one question. If that would be possible. I am struggling with my title, and you are all native speakers of English, it seems to me. And what sounds better? The Artist's Servant, a novel of Constantinople, or Servant and Artist, a novel of Constantinople? Does this sound differently, and which one would be better?
I would go with The Artist's Servant.
Yes.
Likewise.
Yeah, I agree.
The Artist's Servant. Okay. You see, I was thinking of Servant and Artist because of Master and Man by Tolstoy, that incredible story that he has, but But okay, I'm hearing you. I'm hearing you all. Thank you very much.
Okay, I think I'm going to call it. We've gone well over an hour, and I really appreciate all the time and effort our readers have put into preparing for this and their lovely presentations. As Martha Jean Johnson had said in the chat about the range of historic periods in our books, they are all over the place and they're great. And anybody who listens in or watches this program should be able to find something that they would like to read, because my to-do reading list has expanded considerably. So again, I want to thank you all for your time and your effort. And I want to thank our steering committee members, who came in and listened and who helped put this program together. Primarily Lisa Yard, who I think Lisa's still on, and Susan Wans, who did most of the pre-work, in making this happen. I just kind of had to step in at the last minute, and but they did all the work. So again, I want to thank you all, and those folks who stayed up really late, go to bed. Those folks who are still starting their day, take a nap before you have to go out into the world, and the rest of us will enjoy our 77 or -7 degrees weather. All right. Take care, everybody.
That concludes our program. We hope you enjoyed it and learned something new. You can find out more about the New York City chapter of the Historical Novel Society at our website, or contact us at info@hns.nyc.org. And finally, please consider supporting our volunteer panelists and hosts. You can contact them at their websites in the description. Thanks for joining us.